Action Comics 1060, Philip Kennedy Johnson with Max Rayner on the art. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the final issue of Johnson's run on Action Comics. Whether or not he ends up doing something super related elsewhere down the line remains to be seen, but this is wrapping up his current story and indeed his tenure on Action, which has been on for a while. You know, this has been a
Yeah.
two year run, more or
I mean,
less.
started with right before Future State, right? So you had the Superman issues with John and Clark.
Yeah, and that was January and February 2022.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, two
So,
years.
hmm
So exactly 2 years actually.
yeah.
So yeah, we ended the last time obviously with Superman and Co going off
Yeah.
to Earth Al Ghul because that's
Um,
where Otho was. Otho trying to be manipulated
hmm
by Sister Shadow to try and become an Al Ghul. And to be honest, by the end of the issue, it kind of sounds like she wants to take her body for herself. That
Yeah.
was the vibe I was getting. But
hmm
yeah, so the issue goes in quite quick, despite the fact that it's got the bigger page count being an annual.
hmm
We get some fighting here. We get Superman, Etrigan, and Bloodwind.
Bloodwind. Yep.
That's the one. They help some people who are being targeted by bad guys on this earth, and ask where to find the big dogs, as it were. And they go off and search for Otho, who's training with her sword and all the rest of it. Um, this is like we see them have their full big army. They've got blimps, they've got bat monsters, and all sorts of
hmm
troops under their order, and we get some action with that. But ultimately, like the finale of this has to take place back on our Earth, right? It has to be
hmm
back on. Otho doesn't betray Superman the way that Sister Shadow thinks she's going to.
hmm
Of course she doesn't. And it's a very sweet moment when Clark kind of, one refers to himself as her father because
Yep.
we're at that point now. But he calls her his fearless little star child.
hmm
So, all very sweet. But she effectively, Sister Shadow that is, wants to come back and take Earth Zero. So all of her ships, all of her forces are going towards Earth Zero, which, as we see when we cut back to there, the rest of the Super family are dealing with all the Blue Earthers causing
hmm
chaos and chasing after alien immigrants in
hmm
Metropolis, and they're having to try and fight them down. And then we get I'm getting flashbacks to the start of Rebel Moon here, sadly, but a portal opens in the sky and the big ship from Earth Al Ghul comes through it. But yeah, so this is where the interesting narrative thing takes place, which is this is where all the Blue Earthers who have been recruited to be part of Sister Shadow's army realize that she herself is bringing an army of aliens to take over this
hmm
Earth, and the Super family are like, look, if you really want to protect Earth, then how about fight with us to stop this invading force? Because they're actually the enemy. Supergirl gives them this little speech. And sure enough, we get them all helping the Super family to fight off this army of bat monsters. Well, I don't even know why they have bat monsters. That's actually kind of out of nowhere. I guess because
It's Bruce and Talia's daughter.
yeah, I
That's what
guess.
I'm going down. And she does magic, so why not? You're using the thing. As much as I love Philip Kennedy Johnson, and I know this is probably between a rock and a hard place, right? I just the his run to go out on a multiversal invasion, kind of not what I wanted. I really liked the whole idea of Blue Earth and what it stood for, and her just to be revealed to be an alternate version of of Damien, right?
Hmm.
Kind of a letdown. And I like a lot of the stuff that happened in here. It's a very good read. It's just kind of disappointing. This is how it ends.
It's a lot more
And
comic booky than the rest of his run's been.
yeah, and I like a lot of stuff here, like with Connor talking to one of the Blue Earthers, where he's like, if you're gonna help us, you gotta help us. You can't just you gotta watch for bystanders. You can't just go and do what you
Yeah,
want.
because he punches something and debris
Mhm.
almost hits like a civilian or
Yeah.
something, and he's like, hey, you got to watch for everyone else.
and that's where the Johnson stuff starts to come through with the whole idea of Superman standing for something. It's not just he's not just the defender of Metropolis. He's the defender of people. And so
Yeah, and I got feels as well when Otho and Ozil are reunited. Yep. I feel like because they were actually separated for a bit here, I actually finally learned which one was which.
Yeah, and so I do like that Ozil comes and he's looking for his sister, and he's remembering the story that Kara had told him about Starchild and Red Sun, and that story plays out, right? We're getting flashes of it as he's going and looking for her, to the point where he faces down Sister Shadow in her big demon form, to lead to Clark and Otho to come back. I like that whole entire sequence. Like that's also very, very Philip Kennedy Johnson, with how it's in what am I looking for? It's weaving in that mythology that's with these characters into what's going on in the story. And yeah, it makes for a good action sequence. The poor Daily Planet globe, though, always takes a hit. I don't think there's an attack on Metropolis where, unless it does take a hit. But yeah, when Clark shows up and is like, get your hands off of my family, that's another great moment. So
yeah, obviously Etrigan, like at the end of all this, banishes Sister Shadow away, and she's sort of yelling, "I'm not done. I'm still coming for you," which does make me think maybe there'll be a follow up somewhere to this by Johnson. Maybe he's setting the seeds for something else down the line. But the final scene, actually, which is after the fight, arguably is one of the best parts of the whole book, which is this ex-con is working at a construction site. And his son comes over for lunch, and they have lunch together. And he's asking his dad if, do you miss your previous life doing bad stuff? And he's like, no, because now I'm building the city rather than, taking it apart. Now I'm helping making it a home, and gives a little speech about Superman and how Superman was trying to save him as much as he was trying to save the people he was hurting. And it all builds up to this big splash page at the end. And says that Superman reminds us that the world's better with us in it, So it's not just about the world being better because Superman's there. It's about Superman making us all better for ourselves. So
yeah, Superman leads by example, and he knows. We've got a lot of this in Philip Kennedy Johnson's run that he does things to help people, not just to be a hero, right? Like the Metallo stuff, right? It's his compassion to Metallo that eventually leads to them winning that big fight, and stuff. And so, and this character, I kind of had forgotten about him, but this is the guy that checks in with Superman, or Superman goes and checks in with him to see how he's doing, on the construction site. That was like it during the Action Comics run, once he gets back from Warworld.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remembered that. I just couldn't, I don't know if you ever knew his name. Yeah, I don't know if you ever knew his name, but this was one of these moments though, like, this is a really good few pages, but it does kind of feel like going to this right after the fight was done felt a little rushed, and it makes me wonder if Johnson did find out kind of last minute that his run would be ending in 3 or 4 issues, and he would be like, oh shit, I have to quickly pull this together and wrap it up. Like I say, I mean, I do hope there's maybe some follow-up down the line in the form of a mini or something, whatever he may end up on.
Yeah.
But if not, then I just hope Johnson does end up with another book at DC. Obviously, he's doing Green Lantern War Journal, and that's been very good so far, but I absolutely hope he gets another book in the near future, because this has been great stuff.
Yeah, so that reminds me, when we were talking about Green Lantern War Journal the other week, and we had the Derlin guy, I found out via Twitter as I was scrolling through, that's the same guy that Johnson used in the Warworld arc that represents United Planets. So he's running things too. So I feel like Johnson's built him up as this overall big bad across his runs, and how he has his hands in different things. But he was the guy that was responsible for the United Planets taking over the Green Lantern Corps.
Interesting.
So, there's some space in between those that I had forgot, but luckily some comic book person on Twitter pointed that out. I was like, oh, okay.
I mean,
It makes a lot of sense.
At the very least, then, he's got some running through lines through all of these different books, which some writers do when they're doing different books at the same company. Pie in the sky could be that maybe whatever summer event we're getting next year, maybe Johnson's the one doing it, and like all this is building up to something big like that. But I'm not necessarily thinking that's the case. Like, that feels like it's a little bit of a reach, but we could see where some of this stuff goes. I just hope Johnson stays in the DC camp. The fact that he's still got a book going right now obviously is a good sign, but and that just started recently as well. But I hope we get a bit more. I think this Action Comics run's been fantastic. It's definitely like maybe ended on the not weak, but on the weaker end of its own scale, because Warworld,
like a downbeat, right?
Yeah, because Warworld was so fantastic, and all the stuff early on was so next level, and I really enjoyed the arc with Metallo, and I've enjoyed kind of the build to some of this Blue Earther stuff. But I would just say that this final, 4 issues or so in this annual have just felt a little bit like we're rushing to a finish, and I don't necessarily think that's on him per se. That could just be a case of he thought he had, more issues to go. He thought maybe he had another 6 issues after that to finish his story, and then he was like, no, you don't. This is all you've got. That's what it feels like. Maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe this is just the way it is, and we're making an excuse. But it certainly does feel a little bit rushed at the end here. But there's a lot of good stuff in here, though. I loved how they handled the stuff with the kids. I kind of agree that the whole other dimension with an army coming through a portal does feel like it doesn't need to be there. But hey, like you say, it's a pretty solid read. It went in very quickly despite the fact that it's a 40-page book, and it did give us some nice send-off moments, and that final scene with the dad and the son's very good.
I was gonna say, that little epilogue that it has really pulls it back together, where it pulled it from me going like, okay, that was fine, but it was kind of unceremoniously just ending. And then when we get to him again, I was like, oh, okay, this is what he's doing. He's, reminding us of how the average person sees Superman, which is how he started, right? With the future state stuff, where that girl was going to the Superman museum in Smallville, and it was how the average person would look at it. So I do like that he was able to, bring it back around that way. And let's say this is the only work he gets to do on Superman. I feel like it's still a pretty good word to go out on in perspective. So, but yeah, it's again a bit disappointing, but still a good read. Like, just wish there were things that happened differently. That's all.
Yeah. All right, what are you giving Action Comics Annual?
I'm going to give this, after all that, I'm still going to give this an 8.
Yeah, I was thinking 8. It's it's not the peak of the run by any means, but it's still a really solid, put-together issue with a lot of nice moments for the characters. I do like them convincing the Blue Earthers to work with them. I think that's an interesting place to take it, and the epilogue's very good. So, yeah, 8 out of 10 for me as well.